Recording in progress.
All right.
Hello, my name is Reggie Watts. It's good to be here on your show. Recording in sorry. Hold on a second. Let me turn on this video here.
That was very believable.
Perfect.
Let me put this on too, just in case. See if do you like this audio quality or do you like
Uh,
this audio quality if I could find it? Because you know how it is. Stuff isn't supposed to function really easily. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay.
Actually, things have functioned very
Um,
well today in the technical setup for this. I think this was our easiest setup ever.
this is a wood
really?
table that I'm going to knock on right here.
Oh my God, this is great. Um, oh shit. Oh, okay, no. Let's see. I know it would be great if if this just like worked really well. That would be amazing. That would be. I'll make sure. Yeah, it's working. It's charged. Well, for you, you can still say that your setup was the easiest. So that's, you know. All right.
I'm just wondering if
Hello. Can.
I'm
Oh,
just
there we go.
I'm just
Okay.
wondering if that's my cursor on Reggie's face. It looks like a prison teardrop tattoo.
Oh,
From
yeah.
what
I
I'm
think
saying.
we should move the
Hold on, I'm just going
cursor.
to move
Oh,
it.
maybe it's my tier. I just got up, so it could be just a tier.
Yeah, so welcome to the Good Standing Podcast. And today we're excited to welcome Reggie Watts. Reggie, we originally got connected through a newspaper of the future that I was involved with putting together. This was back in 2013. There was a big climate march going on in New York City, and we put together sort of art installation, performance piece, and you were one of the people that contributed to our publication. I don't actually have a physical copy anymore. It's at my place in New Mexico, and I will dig it up one day because you are quoted, and I'm sure you said something amazing. I was trying to find it before this. But yeah, I think my first interaction with you was noticing your generosity and your genuine care about solving problems and your sort of depth of thinking about issues and most notably, here at Good Standing and also our venture capital studio, Radical Systems, our major mission is solving big problems and working with people like yourself to address the issues that often are swept under the rug or often get sort of punted by companies or investors that claim to be solving them but kind of kick the can down the road. So I'm excited to talk with you today about a bunch of different issues, and we'd love to just hear from you, like, what's going on in Reggie's world today and what's going on and kind of your journey with what you're calling the direct economy and how you might want to introduce that.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think you know, I've been very frustrated for the last few years with my ability to output um ideas, like things that I would like to complete, things that I'd like to see in the world and so forth. And I think uh and I think for me it definitely like would almost like put me in a bad mood, like or not bad mood, but just like grumpy and depressed at times. And then I kind of realized that it has to do with me not being able to output the things that I want to do. And so I just have this backlog of creative ideas, but they're not being executed or actualized. And then when I do use the traditional systems, like through my management and through my agents and things like that, I'll get the ability of, I'll, I mean, I have the opportunity to pitch, but most of the time, nothing happens with the ideas. I mean, I think that they're good ideas, and I don't think I'm crazy for thinking that. I think I have pretty good taste in, stuff that I like and things that people like. And so it's always a matter of it's not the mandate, it's not currently in the mandate of the people that I'm pitching to, or, there's like all myriad of reasons why it doesn't happen. It's just like not the perfect timing. And I get tired of, essentially it feels like begging and, asking for permission to do an idea. And to these people that are like, all they really have are resources and distribution, but distribution already exists. And resources exist as well. Like, I have a fan base. I don't know how to calculate them, but I think it's a good sized fan base. And, I know that they'd be glad to just directly, involve themselves in supporting something that I want to do. And then, of course, it's just there are crowd funding sites and so forth, and that's possible. But then that's another like technical leap that I have to manage, and I'm not exactly the best at staying on that stuff. All that to say that I think that there's a way that there can be a simpler way to just go, hey guys, I want to do this thing. You guys want to invest in this, and to my fans, and then my fans go, yeah, and then they just send the money, and then I make the thing, and I'm transparent about it, and I do the thing. So I just think the age of artists in general relying on these like larger systems for distribution and so forth, uh, I think those days are a little bit limited, or at least there's going to be a viable alternative to those systems, because they were kind of unnecessary in the first place because of capitalism. Capitalism, just invents doorways, in the middle of paths that people have been using freely for centuries, and just says, no, you've got to pay us. It's like, why? Oh, because we built a door. Oh, because you built a door and we have to use that door to get through it now. It's like, I'm just going to go around it. Well, if you go around it, we'll stop you. Well, I'll try going around it anyways. No, if you go around it, they will just imprison you. You're like, what is going on here, guys? Can we just live in a world where if people want to support something, they do, and it happens? Why do we have to go through all this bullshit? So, all that to say, long-winded, but that's what I call the direct economy, is just us, and that's like people trading with each other, and then fans supporting things directly.
Yeah, and with doors come gates, and with doors and gates comes producer notes and perhaps even censorship or the doctoring of the creative material itself, the mission, the vision. So there is some degree of capitulation. And I do think we're also a little bit past this age of asking for permission. I mean, the existence of this platform here is a part of this sort of new paradigm to some degree of, I'm a writer, a journalist who, people ask me all the time, who do you write for? And I don't really feel comfortable answering that question anymore. And part of it is I'm kind of tired of asking those places for permission to do what I do. So I think there's like this sort of shared feeling for people who want to deliver direct to their fans or direct to the public. And then, of course, the mainstream tends to have some issues with this, or tends to dismiss those who attempt to do this, right? And it's just often a system of control or an ideology of control. At the same time, there are studios and publishing houses and newspapers and magazines who often do good work. But I think it's pretty obvious the paradigm has shifted considerably. What are your thoughts on that, Ash?
Yeah, I think my major questions are, how aware are people at these major studios or publications that the model is going to shift to something else? Are they in the mindset, in your opinion, of squeezing every last drop before they collapse? Or are they just totally blind to the fact that culture and society actually wants a different model and will move towards it if someone comes forward?
Yeah, I think they might be a little blind to it. I think that they know, but I think that they've got that too big to fail mentality. And but the thing that's interesting about not adapting is you can definitely squeeze the lemon. You can squeeze the wring out the sponge as much as you want, but you can't expect that to continue. Beyond that, I personally think when someone cracks it, cracks the conduit and larger artists start, I mean, imagine if Beyonce or someone like that was just like, I'm just gonna go direct, from the fans or whatever. I mean, they would make so much money. It would be insane how much money they would make. And the reason why they don't do it is because they have all these partnerships. They've entrenched themselves and interwoven themselves with all of these. I mean, for lack of a better term, and like you said, there can be good actors involved there are good companies. There are people at company. I mean, companies are just people. Corporations are just people, and whoever's leading them, there definitely can be like good people. But corporations get complex because you've got shareholders and all this stuff, and then you got this overlayering of people who need to put their voice in the hat to like keep their job. And so you get like ideas that are unnecessary. They're just kind of filler. And so then you kind of get the aggregate of this kind of mediocre decision making machine. And so, but I think if someone really big decided to just do that, like Taylor Swift or someone decided to do that, they'd see how much money we're making, and they would be absolutely terrified. The business would be so terrified. And businesses like Spotify, which are just the worst, and just one of the worst businesses ever for artists, they need to be terrified. They need to be made irrelevant. And I hope that someone does, like, medium to large size artists start doing this, because I think that that's the way that we can change the tide, because younger, less experienced artists are going to be much more afraid to do this stuff. And, it's just because they're like, well, I want people to see it. That's where everybody sees it. And I want the distribution and whatever.
Yeah. Reggie, there was, I think, like a big feature morning news segment about ticket scalping in the sort of like digital algorithmic age that's driving up ticket prices to these astronomical levels, especially for these bigger artists who you might be alluding to. We all kind of know who they are at this point. And part of that is these somewhat monopolistic entities, which I'll name. And Reggie, we know you're out there performing and can fill up traditional venues, and perhaps will continue to be a part of some of these entities that are kind of in this symbiotic relationship. I'm thinking about Ticketmaster and Live Nation and their relationships to venues across the country, across the world. So people are sort of pushed, performers are sort of forced to engage with this network. And one thing I was looking at with the advent of StubHub is like, well, that's just a digital platform. But this news segment that I watched, which I'll find, it might have been like Good Morning America or something like that. There are human beings who are essentially scalpers working at these companies who are to some degree complicit in something that's a little bit murky ethically, right? So it is this big cumulative web where everyone is sort of complicit to a degree. Us who buy tickets through Ticketmaster or go to festivals that are put on by Live Nation. So we're all part of this big complex soup. And, like, I would love to see you at a storied venue that is maybe tethered to these entities, and artists are getting paid. But I think the fans are kind of losing out. So I also don't want to get too far away from Spotify, because that's important too. But let's throw that back to you. I named a few of these big entities, and there is probably some degree of not wanting to bite the hand that feeds, right? This is something we all feel, sort of under the yoke of huge institutions to some degree. But for somebody like you who's so multifaceted, you're not just a musician, you're a comedian, and you're a host, and you're kind of a philosopher, and you're an actor, you're all this stuff, which means you have to kind of engage with an even vaster network of these entities being as multifaceted as you are. So maybe go a bit more in depth and tell us a little bit about how you're navigating that currently, outside of just being able to create content or not being able to get it out. What are your thoughts generally on what I just articulated, that sort of larger web, that larger network, and how you personally navigate it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it stays pretty simple, just because I have management and agents, and so it's just really deal dependent. So I get an offer, and then I'm like, I think that is that number in line with how we think my value is currently, and then yeah, that's great, and then I just do it. Although with my booking agent, he's really amazing, and so he'll book as much as he can. He books independent agencies, or sorry, independent venues, and like my last tour, it was probably like 80%
Wow.
independent venues. So that was pretty awesome. So there's that. I would say, like, yeah, I mean, it sucks. It's like obviously Pearl Jam in the '90s had that huge row with Ticketmaster, and they switched to brown paper tickets, and it's just I think it's impossible to get away from when it comes, because of capitalism. It's like capitalism will just wear down and revert to its natural state, which is exponential growth, um, at any cost. And generally the cost is for the goods that are being traded, and then it gets reflected down to the customers and so forth. And so really it's most of the system is geared towards the people that are making money, that are making the most money, so that they need to make more money. So I think that the nature, the complexity, all the overlays in capitalism, I don't know if there's a way to fix that other than companies having such moral integrity that they organize their business to protect the sovereignty of artists, and to another degree the sovereignty of fans. Um, that fans know that the artists are being treated well, the business is sustainable, that is the middle person providing the tickets and so forth, but it's not seeking to go bigger than its sustainability. And so, but that really takes people within that system. I mean, especially those companies, it takes them to hold a moral and ethical ground that shareholders will not allow for, because shareholders are abstracted from the equation. Shareholders are only looking at a graph, and they're only looking at the number has to go up. So the problem is, I mean, there are other problems, but the main problem is the shareholder model is terrible. It has nothing to do with the passion. Like if it's a music company that's selling tickets, it's like many of the shareholders probably don't really care about music. They just they saw it in the portfolio and thought it's a good investment, and like we're going to make money, and we're going to make money off the backs of artists. Like essentially, artists are going to be, and I don't think that this word is too crazy to say, but it's a type of slavery or an indentured servitude. And but they don't care about that. So, and then the customers are like, well, I need to see this artist, and so like this is the way. It's like, yeah, I know the tickets are inflated by 80%, but I've got to see my artist. And then the artists are like, well, I got to play and I got to connect with my fans. So and it's all that we have. That's the only system that we have. And I think I don't know. It's like, it's a weird thing. I don't see how it's going to change other than artists just saying, like, we're not playing that game anymore, and we're going to figure out a new system, which is there. The demand, I mean, the things that would be difficult is to drum up support for what an artist wants to do. But what's interesting about the model is that less fans supporting an artist directly equals the same amount as, like, I'm just guessing, but like 5 times the amount of fans. So the price that someone pays for whatever you're offering, and they're offering it directly, and obviously if there's like some kind of a service to process a credit card or whatever, there's like a small percentage, but aside from that, which is relatively small, that's the only thing being taken away. And in that paradigm, they're cheap, tickets are cheaper, artists are being supported fully, and there's just no middle parasite. And so I think that artists, like, oftentimes I get messages back, like when I'll post things about direct economy or things like that, they'll be like, but I need this system, people have discovered me through this, and I'm like, I'm not discounting that, but at a certain point you do have to just make a move. And it doesn't mean that you have to completely divorce yourself from those systems. There can be a transition. It's like you can start to do this direct economy model, and if that starts to take over, then you can just say see you later to the other models. But we have to do that. And there's no musicians union. There is a musicians union, but there's no like unionized, unified front. And I think it's just going to take chipping away at it by particular artists over time. I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question, but
No, totally. And I'd love to talk more about that solution or where we think things can go, because I also see that it's possible and it would involve enough artists signaling to their communities that they're doing this direct economy model, but also banding together. So I think that's a microcosm for what's going on in the macrocosm of the capitalistic system, transitioning to something else, which is about getting rid of this sort of middle parasite layer, as you're saying, and promoting more individual entrepreneurial takes on what people are doing for their income, but also still collaborating together to meet their basic needs. And that's a lot of the research that we've done here on sort of, a macro level. And what I like about kind of applying that in this sort of artist creator world and working with artists and creators is I think that this can help the public adapt. And we need to adapt right now to a different economic model. I mean, I think everybody's arriving at that. So I think partnering with artists to help communicate what's possible, show what's possible, and also build the systems around that not only can benefit the artistic and creative industries and the people to be more supported who are providing that value, but I think it can be a real model culturally that people can get behind. So I don't know how much of our audience is going to be so familiar with the actual issues with an artist like yourself and a platform like Spotify, or kind of the transition to streaming. So I'd like to take some time to just hear your thoughts on, or hear how you might explain that to someone who's like, oh, Spotify's great, right? Like you get all this distribution. Could you just kind of break down what are the actual issues there?
yeah, in a nutshell, or at least in a shell that a thing classified as a nut comes in, I would say, yeah, it's like, what do you call it? There's actually a great video. I will explain it, but there's also a video that I would recommend people go see that's just up. My friend Yancey Strickler, who created Kickstarter, has a TED Talk that just came out, and I was at TED this year, and he spoke and just completely inspired me. Especially his his last line was like heavy, where he just says really plainly, he just says, artists don't need pity, they need power. And hold on a second. But yeah, and I would say the issue is that people take advantage, like, a capitalistic system is what's amazing about the capitalist system is that it does work. It works on a paper level. You're like, here's the system, these are the components involved, this is how it's applied, this is the conduit, and this is how it sustains itself. And I'd say I'm never like a system is absolutely evil. It's the morality, around the conditioning that happens around the system when it's unchecked, and for whatever reason, capitalism just it can't divorce itself from this greed addiction. It can start, any system can start really nice. It's like, oh yeah, everybody's making money. You're making money. Yeah, yeah, it's working. It's, transaction layers working, all that stuff. And then someone's like, if we tweak this number, we could make even a little bit more. It's like, oh yeah, okay, well, let's try that, and then over time that becomes more secretive, and they're like tweaking little, it's almost impossible to not have that system get infected, because otherwise it would just be working fairly, and it's just not. And it's gotten to a point where it's really, really terrible. But I would say, like, going back to Spotify, what ends up happening is here's a catalog of music that you've generated. Now we're going to convert that to a streaming level. And obviously, like in the beginning in the 90s with Napster, I believe that was in the 90s, late 90s, Napster, uh, ripping CDs. First, it started with like ripping CDs. People just like, I'm just going to copy this music onto this blank CD. And the music industry is like, you can't do that. That's stealing, which technically it was. But at the time, I was like, I don't give a fuck. but I'm like, is my music out there? And I can kind of see it. Obviously, if you were a small label and like people are, copying stuff, you're like that's taking away from our business, and I get that. But that's where it kind of started, and then it went to MP3s, where it was just like all digital, and people were ripping or trading MP3s, and then of course there's like huge lawsuits and all that stuff, and Metallica going after them, and all, that whole thing. And then as the internet became more mature, and bandwidth got cheaper and more prevalent, then the idea of streaming these from a server started to become a popular thing. And sorry for over explaining it, but it's just the evolution is interesting. And then streaming was like, again, it started kind of in an illegal place, and then of course the industry eventually catches up and says, no, we're going to provide that. Apple's like, we're just going to provide that as a service. That's what we're going to do. We are just going to provide music, streaming, standardized quality streaming music. And so then that happens, and then then you have a few players, and then all of a sudden, of course, someone like runs the numbers and comes up with an ingenious way of capitalizing on that, and then you get something like Spotify, which in the beginning seems like, wow, it's so convenient. Almost all my artists that I want to listen to are in one place, and I just have to enter their name into a search bar, and it appears, and then I can listen to it. And that certainly is a beautiful thing on the customer side. That is an amazing thing. Like, oh, was that Pat Metheny song? Oh, let me look it up. Pat Metheny Phase Dance. There it is. Oh shit, here it is. Let's listen to it. Yeah, so that's what I was talking. And you continue your conversation, and it's fluid. But then of course the incremental robbery starts to happen, and now we're at a point where the amount of money that's made per stream is like, it's just weird because it's like it's a stream. So somewhere someone thought psychologically a stream is worth less than buying an MP3 and owning the MP3, having that file on your computer. Like, it's cheaper because you don't own it. It's not physical, even though it never was physical. But like, you don't own it. It's a stream. So you're just renting. It's like Blockbuster on steroids. It's like you're just renting it for a moment, and then it's gone. And then if you want to hear it again, you can re-rent it, or you've got a subscription that pays for your rental costs. But each time you play it, it's so minuscule. I mean, you can look up how much money artists make, compared to compared to traditional models. If you go back, just by 5-year increments, you'll see the amount of money that artists were getting for what they made and what was purchased is way, way, way higher. And now it's like, someone has a song that's streamed like I don't know, let's create it 10 million times, and again, I'm just paraphrasing, but they're making like 2% or 3% of what they would have been making. It's insane, the numbers. It's crazy. And yet, because it's so prevalent and so popular, that's just like, everyone's like, well, that's just the way it is. And it's insanity. It's crazy when you hear these numbers, and fans get pissed off at it, and obviously artists are bummed about it. But because it's such a massive system, it disempowers people to actually do something about it, because they're like, I don't know what to do. I'm not sure what to do about this. And so we're at this point now where I think that there is a consciousness around people getting tired of that, people looking for other things, but it's going to take something easy, as easy as it is to put your a name that you want to hear, like music you want to hear in the search bar. Someone has to create a system that is at least 80% that easy. Because Spotify right now, and Spotify is like terrible for so many reasons, like that now they're doing this ghost artist thing again in this TED talk by Yancey Strickler. Because what he's promoting is something called an artist corporation, which I've gone to a couple meetings for, and it's pretty amazing. It seeks to put artists at the top of the pyramid when it comes to a corporate structure. And so they're advocating for a new corporate structure called an A Corp or an Artist Corp. And so this is a solution, talking about solutions. It'd be great if you guys had Yancey on there.
We'd love that.
He'd be amazing for you guys. But anyways, but the idea is like to put artists there. Long story short, with Spotify, it's like it's like there was just a report that the CEO of Spotify just invested 600 and something million dollars into a weapons corporation. And it's like the money that's being harvested, it's independent of music. He doesn't care about music. It's just a capitalistic model that generates income and revenue. And it doesn't matter if it would have been artists or, animals, whatever it is, it wouldn't have mattered. It's just generating money. And he obviously does not, excuse my Italian, doesn't give a fuck about it. It's like and that's the problem with art and capitalism. They don't match because art is the expression of human consciousness and other humans resonating with that and supporting it by their interest in the way that it inspires them. But when you insert this middle layer, it seeks to divide the idea of what art is, and then once that's divided, then it like further wants to subdivide so that it can extract as much as it can resource wise. So long-winded, but streaming is very, very damaging because it feels like a faucet. You can just turn it on and like listen to as much music as you want, turn it off. It also divorces fans from the preciousness of music, appreciating music. It's more like music on demand is the same thing as turning on a light switch. And so there's a lot that it does that I think devalues. And it's not to say that the genie's out of the bottle. So I'm not like advocating for like trying to reverse that, but a system can come into place that values artists. And I think like that direct relationship will create a better bond with fans, and fans will just kind of have a new appreciation for artists.
Yeah. I also think, as far as Spotify is concerned, and yeah, it does seem that all roads lead to fostering, nurturing, facilitating the military-industrial complex. There's a lot of evidence for that across multiple industries, which is troubling and disturbing. But I think about $600+ million. That's money that Spotify could put towards new initiatives that could be exciting and impactful, that could actually support artists, which in turn could probably return revenue to them, meaning discovery, sort of investment in artists, smaller labels, things that maybe could come under a bigger banner. I'm throwing out more sort of concrete, almost, early 21st century, even 20th century ideas of how they could reinvest in artists, in musicians, and you hear nothing about this. It's almost as if they like the free press of people complaining about them, or like any attention is good intention. I have a quick question for Reggie, because Reggie, before you came on, I went through your catalog on Spotify specifically, and there's all this wealth of material, and I'm obviously hesitant to say content. This is an artist delivering material over the years, but there's a lot of material, if you will. And I also noticed that it's live shows, it's stand-up, it's straight-up albums. It's a diverse set of material. And Snoop kind of came into the news a little while back saying, man, this track had, a billion things and I only got this. And he was on the other side of a sort of rebuttal, which is, well, Snoop, you were one of several artists on that track, right? So the other artists on the track maybe get a cut, and there's a lawyer, there's a manager, there's the label, there's this, there's that. There's all these things where perhaps the artist thinks they're completely sort of centered in the conversation of royalties as it pertains to, let's just say, one song. So for you specifically, having not only this wealth of material, but a lot of it involves collaborations with all sorts of other artists and all this stuff, what's that look like when you have multiple albums, live albums, etc., and perhaps collaborators who are on the creative side, on the sort of administrative or production side? What's that like for you, navigating that in the sort of streaming era, things getting sort of broken up like that? Do you think about that? And what's that like for you specifically? And what do you think about that sort of rebuttal argument, the idea that it's getting dissected in a way that he might not even be conscious of necessarily?
Yeah, but it's like all that stuff happens behind the scenes because the reason why artists are so easy to take advantage of is because they want to stay in a creative mode, and the creative mode is, that's where an artist resides, right? They have an idea and they're channeling that idea, or however you want to define that, but they have a need to bring out an idea into the world. And in that mindset, it doesn't predispose you to having a business capitalistic mindset. So if you can get your thing out and people get to listen to it, that's kind of like the basic, it satisfies you, because you're
That's
like, oh, it's out there.
the operating
Great.
system
We
is.
did it. Yeah. And now we can move on. It's like, I did that. Now let's do another thing and get it out there. And then if there's some kind of income coming, you're like, oh, well, good. I'm getting some money for it. Great. But then when you look at the numbers and you look at how many people are involved, um, that can be very maddening. And then once that's exposed, it's like, even then artists are like, God, that's really fucked up. But I need to keep making my stuff and it's working. People are hearing about it. And I sold out this venue last night, even though the ticket prices are 20% higher than they need to be. And, and the venue is taking this much and the blah, 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 whatever. So I think it's just because I think the system has an arrogance about it, which is that because it's artists, they're easy to take advantage of because they're not really going to fight back because it's just the reality. This is how it is. And it's just hard to divorce that part of it when it comes to splits with other artists and things like that. I think it's just that multiplied by however many people are involved in it. They're like, well, it's working and we're getting a percentage, or your manager or lawyer might say like, hey, we negotiated 2% more. You get 2% more on this deal, which is crazy because so and so didn't make this much, so you're doing good, or whatever. And again, I think it's just immobilizing as an artist. And even though you have all the information, even though you know how it's all getting divvied up, the amount of energy it would take to fight against it is just, it's too much. It's too great. And it doesn't resonate with fluidity, which is creative fluidity is like, it's like, I hate complexity. When people start talking to me about like, oh, we can't do this because of this and because of this, the way that I'm wired, I'm like, well, let's just not do that. I don't want to hear people complaining about how hard something is. Like, that's not why I do what I do. I do what I do because as an improviser, I'm not as precious about my work because it's generated in real time. So I'm a little bit of a different case, but I do not like, as soon as I hear people saying like, I mean, to an extent, obviously, like if there's a problem that needs to be solved and I can see a solution to it, I'll just be like, hey, let's try this. Easy. But if it starts to become more too complex, I just it just shuts me off I'm like, well, let's just not do that. Or let's just get rid of this. If this is the problem, let's just not worry about that and let's just continue this way. So the thing that motivates me as an artist when I hear about the complexity is like, I can't do it in a capitalistic model as easily as I can creatively. So like if someone's like, a lot of people are going to take a cut of this thing that you want to do with your friends. And I'm like, I don't like that. That's complex. Let's not do that. Well, then it's not going to happen. I mean, it can happen, but like the immediacy of it is like, no, we'll have to build a new system in order to get rid of that complexity that you don't like. And that's immobilizing. So like, it's either way, everything's stacked against artists for, directly engaging with their fans, and just like having a simple solution.
No doubt.
Yeah, I think as you're talking, what I'm seeing is there's always going to be a balance between the system that's providing the infrastructure for supporting, connecting, delivering creative works. And right now, it just seems that infrastructure exists for the benefit of the infrastructure itself at the expense of the creators, and at the expense of what you're explaining, the creator's ability to create more value, which ultimately is the system itself shooting itself in the foot, because it's actually limiting the value that could be experienced by all parties by creating such an extractive paradigm. So what I see as like the optimistic, opportunistic standpoint here is that if you do start to build a system that directly supports creators more and empowers them to, create these works, like you're saying, that get shut down within the current system, but that actually the people would love and therefore would find some way to provide value in exchange for being able to receive all of this like unique, new, fresh content, material, perspectives, whatever form it wants to take, that currently just doesn't have a way to get made and get delivered. So from that standpoint, I'd like to hear sort of what you think are the elements of that new system. And we're hearing, these direct connections. But I'd like to hear also about, as a creator, what would it look like to have more freedom and more support to be able to create some of those projects that you say that you have gotten frustrated with because they've gotten shut down. Maybe if you want to tell us about some of those projects or give us some more examples from a creator's perspective of what could that world look like.
Yeah, I think I think it comes down to, it's really as simple as just creating a transaction system that connects an artist, a fan to an artist. And we have crowdfunding platforms, obviously Kickstarter and Fourth Wall and whatever, name the other two or three, and they work, but they're still kind of complex in a way, like the way you have to set it up and upload media and show, do blah blah blah. There needs to be a simple layer where it's just connected to just bank accounts, that are transactional, and obviously banks will have a record of transactions anyways, but it just needs to be a simple thing where you're like, I have a project, okay, well, upload whatever media you want directly to it. I want to put a video explaining what I want to get money for. And obviously that has to be, I think if it's basic enough, then it kind of has to rely on trust that, the artist is going to actually fulfill, the promise. And maybe there's some legal, a basic legal framework that says if the artist doesn't come up with a blah, blah, blah within a certain reasonable amount of time, then that money goes back, that it's held until the project is released or something like that. Or anyways, something that's accountability. And so I think the accountability layer is probably the most complex thing, but the transactional layer, I think, wouldn't be that hard to implement. But it needs to be crowdfunding, but something simpler, because crowdfunding, again, because it's still inside of the capitalistic model, there is a lot of complexity to it still. And so for me, when I signed up for a Fourth Wall because I heard it was better rates and stuff like that for artists, but I just lost steam on it because I was like, oh, now I need to add and I forgot to add the and then I don't need an explainer for the and again, that turns me off. I'm like, can we just fucking make the thing we want to make? Can I ask people if they're on board, and if they are, can they just click a thing and donate it and donate the money or whatever, or not donate, but just give money to support the project, and then can I just start working on the project? And that level of that speed of creativity, the commerce level, or the exchange level, the resource exchange level, is not as fluid as creativity itself. And not that I think it would match that, but it needs to at least be 50% that. So I think that what it will take is just either some system that people can just use that already exists, that you can just set up really simply on your own. Oh, you can just set up a website that has, you can upload whatever you want to explain your project. And then you just add this little transaction, whatever module, for people to just click on and go, yeah, I'd love to, whatever, I think that's kind of what it's going to take. is it a standardization? I don't know what it is, but it has to be something that people know that they can do and that people will do. And if there's enough successful projects that come from it, I think people would be into it, and make sure that, people can't get ripped off. That's, that is kind of a reality thing to it. But a certain amount of trust is good. If fans know the band that they love, and then and the case that is being made for the project that an artist wants to have supported feels good, I think for the most part that should work. I just can't imagine a lot of, like, artists who've been around for a while, or that you love and that you want to support, would take advantage of their fans in that way. And I'm sure that once in a while that might happen, just to laziness, or like just whatever, just things falling through the cracks, or like maybe there's an interpersonal, problem with the band itself, or whatever the artist group is. But I think that a certain amount of trust is a part of what that direct economy would look like. I think yeah. So I guess it's just someone needs to kind of do a step by step. Here's how to set up a thing where you can, like, blast this out to your fans and say, like, here's a thing I'm trying out. Let's see if it works.
Yeah. I remember, Reggie, I don't know if you recall this actor, Zach Braff, I believe. He did
Oh, yeah.
Garden State, which was sort of funded in like a traditional studio model. It was still like an indie film. Then a few years later, I think he used a crowdsourcing platform to fund a film he was interested in directing, perhaps starring in also. And I remember there was a lot of backlash. This was years ago. And even then I was kind of like, just because you've played ball with the traditional infrastructure of making a film, I was a little taken aback by how much backlash there was for this guy trying to crowdsource his own film. I do think things have changed since then, but for somebody who has, let's say, played ball with the institutional structures, whether it's network television, Hollywood, the label system, whatever it happens to be, general musical distribution, and then sort of going over into a space where somebody might directly crowdsource, I would imagine that that's changed, like this notion of an artist getting that sort of backlash, or maybe not. Does it depend on the sort of perceived stature of the artist to receive that sort of backlash? So what are your thoughts on that? And do you think that's part of perhaps the animosity that's developed due to this sort of exorbitant disparity of sort of wealth within the capitalistic system, that fans who might not be on the same level as not even major artists, but artists who've had some degree of success, that they're sort of inherently weary of this? Or do you think what's changed in that way? Do you feel like there might be a potential backlash, or no?
I don't know. I would say, at least in the case of my fans, if I were to announce, something like what I was describing, I think they would be excited. And I think if there was any backlash, it would probably be from, maybe, I don't know why there would be backlash, really, because it would be, I imagine if backlash happens from a very well-established artist that's doing something a little bit more complex, like making a film, I could see industry people, or people, younger filmmakers, who are like, see that as unfair because they're leveraging the popularity. I don't know what it would be. It'd either be jealousy, or it'd be people fearing a paradigm shift, that might threaten their livelihood. But I think in the case of just honest fans, like fans that just love the work, I think they would be down to support, and they would be stoked that there's like something that an artist is doing to be more self-empowered, to to, like, they're trying something in order to actually get the value that they're worth, directly from fans. And so I think, like, the way I handle comments in social media, which is, I post something and then I get like someone saying something ugly, on a comment section. I'll look at their profile really briefly and kind of go by vibe, and I'll say, like, I don't really need this voice. This person has, like, put 2 comments like this. I'm not going to entertain that. So I just lose them. And you don't need people that are going to try to, hold a project back or like be negative about something just because they're projecting their own insecurities onto it. So I would say like it doesn't really matter.
Right.
People can say whatever they want to say, but I don't really care. I want to work with people again, like how the thing is that where I'm like, if something gets complex and people are kind of complaining about it, I'll be like, let's just lose it. Let's not do that. Because my job is to preserve the fun. My job is to preserve the joy of creating. And so I won't let any system get in the way of that. And if the system gets in the way of that enough, then I'm just not going to do the project.
Right.
It's not worth it to me. I'll move on to another project because there's literally infinite amounts of ideas that exist. So I think if backlash does happen, it's going to happen. But like, I don't know, unless you're that sensitive, you
Right.
kind of have to realize like it doesn't fucking matter. People are just they're on a keyboard, anonymously. I'm having a bad day. I'm gonna. It's like who cares? Like they're not gonna help you anyways.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Do you have any of these creative projects that you'd be willing to share? If you were going to do a direct economy project,
Mm-hmm.
what comes to mind as being what you would like to focus on?
Well, I have like a few things I've been wanting to do. One is, I don't know if people would get it, but I do want to set up an immersive, what I call a durational temporal immersive experience, which is that I wanted to create a 90s internet cafe. So you'd just find a storefront that's, available for rent and you'd like rent it for a month and you'd get, people who work in the industry, like, production designer or whatever to look at, tons and tons of pictures of what internet cafes look like in a certain region. And then you just build an internet cafe that's pretty accurate, with signs of aging and use and all of that stuff. And, create an intranet that mimics the internet back in 1998. And you have all these computers and you go up to the cashier or whatever, the person like, you know, in charge of the store, and you pay a certain amount of money, which would be 90s prices. And then they would give you a ticket
Nice.
like you got in internet cafes, and you enter that code into the computer, and then you go online for a little bit and maybe message your friend or whatever. And, and there'd be a live DJ spinning like music from that time period, and older. And, and in an ideal world, people would be period accurate. They'd be dressed period accurately, and there would be Faraday shielding built into the structure so that no cell signals can go in or out. And you're encouraged to just leave your modern devices in a locker or whatever, or just don't bring them. And and so you just kind of exist in a temporal anomaly, like experience what it's like to be in another time period as much as possible. That's one. It's a pretty high concept. So, I think it could be presented in a way that I think people would be into it, but it's a little bit more esoteric of a sell. I would say the thing that probably would make the most sense is I want to do a live stream performance that would take place in a studio like Gold Diggers in Los Angeles that has like, I think they have 5 studios, or any studio that has multiple rooms, but I think 5 rooms would be great. And I select 5 different bands or musicians to each write a song in there. So, different styles. So like a hardcore band, maybe it's Turnstile without the singer. It's whatever, Deftones without the singer, whatever, like that type of thing. And it doesn't have to be that big of bands, but just as an idea. And then they'd all be in these rooms and they've written these songs that I'm going to sing over, but I've never heard them. So the live stream starts and I talk to the camera for a little while and go, okay, let's go into the studio and see what we got, and then like it follows me and it goes inside. And then as soon as I get into the room, they're just like 1, 2, 3, and they just start this song and I improvise over it. And we make the song and the song ends and I'm like, wow, that was really cool. And then I leave that room and immediately go into the next room and so on and so forth. And then at the end of it, there's a roundup or whatever. And that's kind of it. So then there's a live stream event component to it, but then because it's in a studio, it's multi-tracked. So those tracks get produced, and then that's released as an EP, like a 6-song, whatever, 5-song EP, and then maybe music videos are made from it. Who knows? But on the basic sense, that would be it. So just me live stream going into those things, and then there's a product at the end of it later that's a mixed produced EP. something like that.
I love that. I don't want to divert too far because it's going to come back to what it means to sort of be artist led, artist driven. But Ashley and I were watching the Conan O'Brien Mark Twain Award Prize, and we appreciated you got a little emotional talking about
Mm-hmm.
not only Conan reaching out, but what your experience was like touring with Conan. And you spoke a little bit about what that was like, so you don't have to completely reiterate that, but it made me think of Conan's journey himself, right? This guy who was at the top of what you could call the network hierarchy to some degree, and then got kind of kicked around and sort of messed with in a way that's been sort of widely spoken about at this point. But then, he started doing his own podcast. He still has his travel shows and stuff like that go out there, but sort of like Team Coco was something where it was the fans who kind of rallied around Conan, where he almost had a sort of independent media fan base that, of course, kind of came over from the network, but it was the fans who sort of rallied. And now, not only does he have his own podcast where you still get Conan being Conan, maybe you don't have some of the characters who were at the Mark Twain thing, and we know who they are and they're great. But I just think that was such an interesting sort of narrative there for Conan himself to turn to independent media, to turn away from the sort of gatekeepers who are obviously jerking this guy around. And then the fan base did rally. So for you, do you see yourself maybe developing your own sort of network to some degree, or label, and
Mm-hmm.
perhaps you have? So tell me about that. And again, you've already spoken about being artist driven, staying in the flow, preserving the joy, which is a phrase I love. But do you think about those other things too? Should I build my own sort of agency? Should I have my own label? Should I have this? And perhaps you do to some degree. So tell me about building a sort of infrastructure around you, or are you strictly staying in that artist first flow space?
Yeah, I definitely, I tried to I try once in a while, to do some form of like my own system. I developed an app called WhatsApp, and and it was around for a while, but it just was like, I think maybe a little bit too ahead of its time, and I didn't have like anyone managing kind of like the business side of it. So I was just trying to create a conduit and thought like, oh, the conduit will, will make whatever needs to happen. But it ended up just me being, paying a lot of money to a really cool designer. But in the beginning, it was like, oh, they can do it for the budget I wanted, which was way cheaper than I got quoted from other people. And then, of course, costs start adding up, and like, oh, we have to maintain it every month, and we have to blah blah blah. Oh, and there's a change that's made about, so I'm gonna have to bill you for those hours. So it just kind of became a lot of money that I was spending on an app, and it didn't really go anywhere. People enjoyed it. I don't know how many. There was no way to have a metric for that, but it was out there, and I tried it, and it didn't work. And so
Well, what did this
I
app do?
I got discouraged. What's that?
What did this app do before you go on?
Oh, it was just an app where I put all my media on it, and I could have a live streaming element where I could, talk to people directly, um, and like a Twitch stream type of thing where there could be, I don't know if we built in the ability for people to comment back, but I was definitely able to stream from it, and then I uploaded all my videos, on there, and made videos specifically for it, like my own channel essentially. Uh, that's all it did. That was what it did. There was like definitely, I wanted to, you know, create a monetizing element to it, or at least not, or an exchange, thing to it where I could sell my merch, and I had a store on there that was being built. All that to say that all just, it just became too expensive to maintain, and I had no way of tracking numbers, and I didn't know, there was a lot I didn't know, and I didn't have anybody kind of project managing it, and so that just kind of went away, and I stopped, maintaining it, and it doesn't exist anymore. But uh, that to say, like, I would love to create my own network. That's what I am working on. It's really frustrating because I don't know how to start it still. And I have an amazing partner who's got a really good, amazing organizational mind, but it's like, that's not, I don't think that's their thing. You know, I think that I want to find someone who's independent that like loves what I do, sees the vision, is highly communicative, um, but is able to execute, you know, finish things. So if I have an idea like that, you know, the live stream thing or whatever, they're like, okay, let's focus on that. Let's make it happen. Because it's not, nothing stops that other than resources. And nothing stops that other than uh, making sure that it goes out to the most amount of people that it can. And that, you know, the end product is something that people are aware of and they can have for themselves. And so whatever that middle layer is, you know, that's the only thing missing, you know. So to, long story short, it's just I am looking to do that, but I can't be solely responsible for actually staying on it to make it happen because it just won't get done. And that's not what I'm good at. I'm good at vision. I'm good at uh, designing a system to make sure that the artistic aspect is executed, but the business layer is not, it's not my thing, and I don't want it to be. But I want to find someone who loves doing business as much as I love doing art, and they view business as an art. So that's where I'm at with that.
Yeah, and I think that's it talks about what's needed right now, which is more partnerships between business or sort of investor types and people who are at the forefront of their industry in terms of creating platforms or solutions. Something that I experienced in my own career and that I've seen just looking out there in the world is the business or kind of investor mindset tends to overvalue its side of the equation and undervalue everyone else's, which ends up making a worse product or ends up not even creating a product at all and only focuses on creating a product which is the speculation around a product that might exist in the future and make money off that in the meantime, and then actually the thing itself never gets built. So what I think you're speaking to is a new paradigm where there are business or industry folks who partner up with people within the industries that they're hoping to create solutions. And that's a core part of our model here that we're hoping to develop more partnerships and help kind of fill in the gaps. So we're going to take it as a prompt, this internet cafe. We're going to take it as a prompt, what you're putting out there to the community in terms of this sort of live stream concept. And also, you know, finding someone to pair up with you on the network, because I really think that that's right now when we're facing this sort of like economic depression, you know, well, it's not that people don't have ideas, and it's not that there's not people out there that are looking to work on these types of ideas. We're just not necessarily thinking in the right way. So I think that I think that this can be successful, and I think that there are people out there that would be really happy to find a way to support it. I think it goes back to the same question we're speaking to, though, is how are these ideas getting out there? And who are we going to fund or support or work together on the ideas? So I think that the more kind of like little projects that get piloted is sort of the first step, right? Like we need to see 5 different creators come forward with 5 different direct economy projects that work, quote unquote. And then we'll see on the phase 2, how could those different creators band together as sort of, you used the word union before, maybe it's like a cooperative. I think the Yancey Strickler idea, the artist corporations, right? There are probably some infrastructure that could be created to then help support the direct economy to come into existence. And it sounds like we're moving in that direction. I want to say Meta label that Yancey created, the person who made this neon sign, Lena, is also a partner at Meta Label. So we actually have been speaking with them about coming into the studio. So it's in the works. You brought it up. The neon is the neon speaking to us. So just wanted to give a shout out to Lena there because we're trying to get that to happen too.
Yep.
So,
Sick.
yeah. So I think it's happening. I think that's sort of our perspective here, and I think we're in the phase of piloting some small direct economy projects. That's
Mm.
where I see it. So it sounds like we've got two from you. What other artists do you think what other artists do you think could be good shepherds of bringing the direct economy into existence?
Well, I think the person that comes to mind. There's a couple of people I know that are working on their own versions of it. There's Imogen Heap, who is trying to create essentially kind of an NFTized version of artists' property so that it can't be used, for AI for training purposes if they don't want to, and it can't be used in ways that, an artist doesn't want their work used, which I think is a cool initiative. And I think it's called Oracles is the name of the project. I don't know where it's at, but it's interesting, but it's kind of tertiary to what we're talking about, but related. I would say James Blake has been, trying to create, but I think what needs to happen, there needs to be kind of like ooh, oh, I'm getting a feedback or loop back or whatever it's called. Yeah, I think what's needed is something that's not revolving around an artist's ownership of a system. It needs to be something that is collaborative, that the system exists larger than any one artist that's trying to, implement it. And I think like it's okay to know where something came from, obviously, but and all that stuff. But I think it's not about ownership. This is about creating a system that everybody can collectively involve themselves in, and it's self-improving, through the community, through use, and through fans communicating, artists communicating, and that could be a product of an AI that's trained on these things. It's got an AI aggregator that's self-trained, that's started from zero, that's just focused on that problem. And AI could be a huge game changer for creating systems like this, to help artists offload their way of speaking about things, which is different than business people, the way that they speak about things. They can kind of immediately translate stuff, and and if they're agentic, they can actually perform tasks, and get things done, write code, for a transactional platform. They can, work collaboratively with humans. And so I don't know. I mean, obviously, keep it as human as possible, but use AI as a powerful tool when needed, to kind of make up for the shortcomings of artists being business people, which is just not a thing that artists have to be unless they're truly interested in that. But so, yeah, I think you're right. I think there is I think things are changing. I think things are changing very rapidly. And I think we have all the tools that we need. And the problem is that, business and capitalism has created a system. It's been built on greed, but the network exists, and it's too late to try to control the narrative, because the narrative isn't working to be controlled anymore unless people are kind of being apathetic. But people know that streaming takes advantage of artists. People know that studios can take advantage of artists, like film, whatever, even the art world, which is terrible for visual artists. The amount of money that they get back for the art, for the amount of money that the art gets sold for, how they don't know, there's no receipt of when the art is sold, how it's sold, how much it's sold for precisely. That's not revealed to the artists. So, or dance, dancers not even being being paid remotely, even close to the amount of effort and training that goes into their art form. These types of things, this is all known now, I think. And that means that there's motivation to change. And I think people don't want to be involved in that anymore. And they want to be able to make a living. And the only way to do that is to bypass the current systems and use the network that exists, in a way that is fair to artists currently. And I think that you just have to bypass it. You have to make these systems irrelevant, which they are.
Yeah, Reggie, after the election and the beginning of the new year, I found myself really getting kind of shocked to my core about being on certain social media sites, some of the big ones, some disagreements generally, morally, ethically, politically, about who's running it and whether or not they're apathetic or sort of worse. And I found myself withdrawing dramatically, if not deleting entirely, my presence on certain sites. And, I wasn't swimming in followers necessarily. But, as a creative person myself, I had to run into this notion of these things are like massive utilities now. They have been to some degree for a while. And what does it mean to withdraw from these sort of digital networks with a huge sort of audience, so to speak, globally? What does it mean to unsubscribe there? What does it mean to delete app? And what are the consequences there when you're in the capitalistic machine and one must market oneself, one must brand oneself? And can you endure the inherent conflict of unsubscribing or deleting? So when I hear network too, I also think of just how ubiquitous, how overwhelming these sort of sites are, and the consequences of unsubscribing or deleting. So, as we're talking about networks, as we're talking about fans, as we're talking about capitalism, I just want to throw that by you because, as I was doing a little research for this, I kept coming across this word disinformationist, how you sort of self-described at one point, possibly still. And of course, disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, all these types of dubious information that exists out there. And then I see disinformationists, which I'm sure is sort of creative, ironic, somewhat tongue-in-cheek. But I believe this is a term you've had out there for a while. I'm just curious, with everything I just said about these networks and what they're putting out there, and this term you've used to self-describe, of course, probably in a cheeky way. What does that mean for you right now in light of everything I articulated and the way information disseminates in the world? Are you still a disinformationist?
Well, the disinformationist part kind of comes from my inspiration from the Situationists International, which was started by a guy named Guy Debord. And I think this book that he released, Society of Spectacle, I think is the name of the book. That was in the 50s. So it was a kind of a conflagration of Dadaism and abstractionism and absurdism, kind of like all fused together. So it was like quasi-political, but only political in that it was artistic in the sense that it wanted to reframe the idea, the association to art, the creative process, and the experience of life in general. And I think I was really taken by that. And of course, like the Situationists, they existed, through decades, and that inspired Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren, who managed the Sex Pistols and essentially created the Sex Pistols as living dolls for Vivienne's style. And so the idea of punk, counterculture, those types of things were interesting to me. And then I kind of got fascinated with disinformation, which is kind of what I would describe my performances as a bit. I mean, I definitely felt more strongly about it back in the past, but because the past is generally back. But yeah, I think what it was the idea that I'm saying some truthful things, and then I'm saying some absurd, stupid, silly things, but I'm delivering it in a very dry way. And so that's kind of the nature of how disinformation functions, right? It's like it's not just saying things that aren't true. It's a mixture of truth and things that aren't true, so that it makes people question their idea of what the truth is. And then, of course, advance that down the line with social media and so forth. And that is what social media is, and how it's being weaponized and used by state actors and people who want to sell products or whatever. And so I think for me, the disinformation thing is more about what I'm doing as a performance, but it definitely, and I think it still holds true to a degree, because I'm using it in a benevolent way. It's just used, to destabilize expectations and kind of put people in a more, not suggestive, but in a more open state at a show. It's like, well, I'll just surrender what I'm going to expect, and we'll just see what happens. So that's kind of where that came from. I think nowadays, yeah, I mean, the way that's being used is just, yeah, it's kind of obvious once you see it. It's kind of obvious, and now we have to develop a framework for navigating that, in social media, and social media likes it because the more confusion, uh, the more uh, of a nihilistic kind of like I'm giving up on trying to figure out what the world is, type of an attitude. It plays into engagement, and so and outrage puts people in like, they're more susceptible to outrage and to anger and frustration and stuff like that, which again is just serves the shareholders. So yeah, it's a weird time. However, I did hear a philosopher once say that we are moving into the age of symbolic communication. And I think that that's kind of true. I think that symbols are going to start to play more of a role in how we communicate because the words themselves are uh, too untrustworthy, and symbolic and actionable behavior, I think, is going to be more rewarded because it produces a direct result, as opposed to someone saying that something is the way it is, or saying they're going to do something that doesn't have as much value these days anymore. So I think the emergent form of communication will be kind of back to an older form of communication, which is symbolic and gestural, like actual actions.
Yeah, real quick, Ashley, I'm going to throw it to you. It's a big part of our ethos. We're sitting in front of our big logo that has some iconography tethered to it, and the title.
Yeah, flower of life.
Yeah, and this notion of good standing, which is sort of bureaucratic or clinical, but then it also has all these other layers to it. What does good standing mean to you at all these different levels? So I was interested in disinformationists in a similar way that good standing could mean like, are you in good standing with the IRS? Are you in good standing with your landlord? But then behind that, above that, somewhere within that is something really sort of truthful. So the idea that we are tethering this notion, both spiritual and sort of administrative, to essentially a logo too that we came up with. And shout out to Lena again, our neon person, who was very helpful, among others, to
Neon Genesis.
Yes, to help us arrive at this thing. Yes, Neon Genesis. So we're there with you too, Reggie. The sense that, not only do we have to sort of engage in symbols, we have to think in more complex terms in terms of the language that we're both kind of consuming, but we're also producing, that we're putting out there. That one must think in terms beyond the literal now. One must be sort of vast in their ability to hold sort of multiple ideas to one symbol, to one word, to one phrase. So I just like this idea that disinformationist or even sort of good standing invites listeners, if you will, to just think in more complex terms and to be open and, not just to think for yourself and question authority as it is, and should continue to be, but to sort of introduce their own level of sort of vastness and complexity to the symbols, the words, the phrases, the iconography, even the ideology that already exists, that we must be more vast in the way we're able to hold ideas and words. So thank you for letting me get that long-winded thing out there, Reggie.
Yeah.
Now, I do feel compelled to check in with Reggie and see how you're feeling right now generally, and then maybe throw it over to Ashley. How are you feeling, Ash?
Well, maybe I had one more question, and then maybe we can wrap it up for today. But I think to be continued.
Yeah. Reggie, we want you back. We want you back.
I'm down.
Yeah, and back maybe in more ways, in more creative, collaborative ways, as we've been discussing, and stay tuned for more of that. But just to continue on with what Kurt is describing in terms of the symbolic level of what's going on here, goes back to something you said in the beginning about there's this system of capitalism, and yeah, there's some issues with the design of the system, but the real issue seems to be that the system rewards people right now who are acting in the most unethical ways. And perhaps if we started to change what we rewarded, it's not so much that we have to shift the entire system, we just have to shift what that system is rewarding. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that one of the elements of what you were describing, has to do with your own values, your own moral compass. The reason that you brought that up. And if that's true, I'd like to hear you share, if that's okay, some maybe personal experiences that have guided you in the development of that moral compass.
Um, I think it comes down to I want everybody to have a good time is the base of all of it. Like since I was a kid, I just wanted to make sure that everybody was having a good time wherever I was, where it was the classroom. If I was a class clown, I just wanted people to be laughing, and having a good time. I made light of things because I thought that was a better state to be in than being miserable or feeling trapped or, those types of things. So I think it comes from that. And I think, I care about people because even in the most selfish sense, it's like you want everybody to be having a good time around you because it makes it more fun to hang out, and and I think it just comes from me caring about that vibe in whatever way, however you want to view that. But yeah, and I think and then that carries over to like even my first band, like full original band where I was an equal member in it. You know, how publishing works and royalties work generally, like if you're the singer and you write the lyrics and you write the top line or the melody to a song, you get more of a percentage than the other musicians in the band. And I didn't like the feeling of that. I thought that just felt wrong because all of us are together writing the song. I mean, it'd be different if I like came in like, here's the song, I wrote all the parts. I think that makes sense. I think that you create a structure that everybody's like, yeah, that makes sense. You did most of the work, but whatever. But in our case, we were writing stuff together. We were, jamming together. I would go away and write the, lyrics and work on melodies and stuff like that. But and I was writing. Everybody was kind of responsible for their own parts, and I felt like that's pretty equal. I don't need to have extra money for writing lyrics, and so so I made sure to split everything equally in all publishing. And I did the same thing on the Late Late Show when I had my band there. I split everything equally with everybody because I knew that they weren't getting paid as much as I was getting paid. I want to make sure that they're getting as the fairest amount of money they can make from what they're contributing as possible. And I think what that does is it's less animosity. If things go slightly strange or someone's feeling a little bit different, that's something they can kind of focus on as like a trigger or like something to focus on, just, to kind of vent their frustrations on. And I would rather that not be the case. And I would rather make less money and know that everybody's feeling good about what they're contributing. So I think that's the evolution of it. And to this day, everything I do is always 50-50. Unless it's like a corporate deal or something like that, obviously, like, my agents are involved and it's like, I want to try to get as much money from a company as much as, as possible. And that's a different kind of market. But if I'm involved in creating something and I'm asking people to be involved with it, that's always going to be an equal split. So that's kind of where it came from.
Cool. Real quick one, your dad, I believe, was a master sergeant in the U.S. Air Force, and I just think about this notion of being creative, but then maybe also this notion of like discipline or, and then traveling around the world. I think wasn't Mark Twain who said travel is the antidote to bigotry or something like that. I think that was even referenced in the special.
Is it? Yeah, in the Conan special. Yeah.
So I think of you traveling around Germany, France, Italy, and then, you're in different states throughout the United States growing up. Montana, I believe. Was it Great Falls? Was it? So even travel.
That's correct.
Even travel. And, just give us just the tiniest bit, Reggie, without having to chronicle your entire life since birth, what travel has meant for you, or even having somebody in the military in this sort of patriarchal role for you, patriarchal in a good way, in a fatherly role, and then a little bit of your mother. I don't want to deconstruct you in some Freudian sense here, Reggie, but your upbringing too, traveling the world, who your parents were and their own sort of diversity, and then growing up maybe not in what we call a sort of coastal elitist metropolitan city necessarily. So just give us a little bit of taste of your childhood too, just a tiny bit, and how that maybe helped shape your ethos, your creativity.
Yeah, yeah, travel definitely had a lot to do with it, just because I was able to see other perspectives, other ways that people exist, and um, other languages, and things of that nature. So I knew that the world was much broader than a small, like a kind of being localized, and only getting fed what you hear on the radio or magazines or TV or films and things like that. So I think that the travel just, it literally just broadens your mind, because you're going to meet people, hopefully, and you're going to get a taste of other ways of being, other ways of living, different foods, different smells, all of that stuff. It broadens your idea of what reality is. And so for me, I think, as a young kid moving around a lot and having a French mother and traveling to France to visit my relatives and things like that, all of that was like super important, because I wasn't like most of the other kids. Some other kids might have been like Air Force brats, or but many of the kids were born in Great Falls, and some of them that I know that I'm still friends with are still in Great Falls. Mm-hmm. So you know, so I think it's important to kind of have a larger, broader understanding of what human beings are, and so I think that that's what travel did for me, and what it continues to do even to this day.
What do you think, Ash? You want to take us out?
Yeah, well, this has been such a pleasure, Reggie. I'm excited for sharing this first conversation, and we'll see where this all goes. We're definitely going to be following up with some of these prompts, and I'm especially excited about the internet cafe idea. I see a lot of potential of that, and also just people having a different relationship with technology right now. I mean, that's also at the core of what we're doing here. So yeah, some real thoughts were stimulated from that. But yeah, let us, if you want to share anything else before we go, or otherwise we can just pick back up in the future.
No, I'm about to have lunch with my friend Ben Seidman, who, check him out. I think he's probably one of the world's best magicians. And he's written books on magic. He wrote a book on one magic trick.
Oh wow!
It explains one magic trick. It's amazing. He's like such a genius. But anyways, but yeah, I don't know exactly what we're meeting about, but I'm meeting with him. I love magicians. I just think they're pretty awesome. And so we're gonna have lunch, and we'll see what happens with that. I'm not sure, but I'll tell him about this conversation for sure.
Great. And Reggie, what kind of 1998 outfit are you wearing to the grand opening of that internet cafe? Like, do you have an outfit vision?
Maybe I should look at pictures of what I was wearing back then. It probably went like oversized red Dickies or Levi's or something like that, and like some like button-up shirt or something. I don't know, or a t-shirt, some big oversized t-shirt, something like that. No doubt. Yeah, I'll have to look at the pictures from my past and see if I want to match that, or if I want to like adopt a different style from that time period.
Yeah. And, Reggie, we just really appreciate you doing your thing and speaking your mind out there, and going hard, but also going playful at the same time, and so we just really appreciate you. So thanks so much.
Oh, man, I appreciate that immensely. It's the only way to do it, guys.
No doubt.
All right.
Thanks, Reggie.
Thanks, Reggie.
Thank you. Peace.
Peace.
Sick.